Welcome to Controlling Ops with Chops. The channel operator family often drives elements of animation in our TouchDesigner projects. Let's take a closer look at how we can use channel operators to control other operators here inside of TouchDesigner. To get started, we can open up the Op Create dialog box and find an LFO chop. LFO stands for Low Frequency Oscillator. This is going to be a pattern generating operator. And in fact, if we hook up a trail chop here, we can actually see the pattern that it generates. And I'll leave our trail here just so we can kind of see that in the background. Now, I happen to know that I want to make some changes to this. So I want to switch the type here to be Gaussian. And I'd like to turn down the frequency to say 0.125. Now, I also want to use this to control another parameter on another operator. What might that look like? Well, let's go ahead and add a movie file in top here into our network. Let's also right click on the output and let's say add a level top here to our network as well. Now I'm going to change the image here because I think I want to use our Trillium here instead. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to use this channel to instead say control maybe over here on the post page, this opacity parameter. How can we do that? Well, let's add a null chop here into our network, and we typically terminate many of our networks with nulls because it allows us to insert changes if we need to do that later on. Now, I want to grab this channel to control this parameter over here. And to do that, we'll start by making our null chop viewer active with the viewer active flag in the lower right-hand corner. We can then click on and holding down the mouse button, drag that channel over to the parameter that we'd like to target. We can now release our mouse button. And in this case, I'm going to select chop reference. This has asked TouchDesigner to write a little Python expression for us here that has actually linked this channel to this parameter. Now that's great. There's another way that we can build this type of connection, however, and that's to use export. So I'm going to go ahead and copy our null chop here because I'd like to use a different operator, and I'm going to copy our level top as well so we can kind of see these side by side. This time I'm going to go ahead and make this null 2 chop viewer active. I'm going to grab that channel. I'm going to hold down the mouse button. I'm going to call them all the way up to the operator that I want to target and all the way over to the parameter that I want to target. Now I'm going to release my mouse button, and this time I'm going to select export chop. Now we'll see that we have a different color here. We have this export instead of this expression. And this is an important difference. We most of the time use these expressions. Every once in a while we do use exports, and it's worth knowing that we can't alter the export. And in fact, we'll notice here down on our null chop that we have a table dat that's docked to it. This is our export table, and here we can see all the information about where our parameter is headed to. Let's take a look at another type of animation that we might actually use. In fact, let's add a trigger chop here into our network. Trigger chop is particularly interesting because it allows us to actually build out some simple animations. So if we go ahead and pulse this trigger pulse parameter, we'll see that it looked like something happened. Well, let's add a trail chop so we can see that animation curve. And if we connect up our trail chop here, what we'll see when we trigger trail chop added to our network, connect that to our trigger chop, and then we pulse that trigger again, we'll see that animation curve. Now that's a hard way to kind of understand what's happening with our animation. So instead, let's actually head over to the comment page. And for a moment, we're going to turn off time slicing. And this will let us see the whole animation curve. Now, important to note is that our parameters are expressed here in seconds. And we can see that here from the dropdown. This is really helpful for us. So we might start here in the attack. So this is the attack length, right? That's how long it takes for us to get up to that max value. And our peak length. So I'm going to increase our peak length. I'm going to head over to sustain page. And I think here I'm going to go ahead and turn down the decay length. Oh, that's nice. There'll be nice sharp decay. Well, let's turn it up. Now we can turn off here that time slice. And now let's use this trigger. So let's add a null chop here again into our network. I'm going to add another movie file in top here. And this time around, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this to say a transform top. Now I'm going to also change the image. I'm going to use it, I think the jelly beans this time. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to use this one channel to control 2 parameters. Now I want them to both control scale, and we can do something slightly different. Before we targeted just a single parameter, this time we want to target both parameters, and we can do that by making our null chop viewer active. We're going to click and hold on that channel name, drag it all the way up to the operator that we want to target, head over to the parameter that we want to target, and this time I'm going to release it on the name of the parameter that I want to target. I'm going to select chop reference, and this will allow me to target both parameters at the same time. Now, when we head back to our trigger chop and we pulse that trigger pulse parameter, we'll see our animation run. Now, there are lots of ways that we can use channel operators to control other operators inside of TouchDesigner, and this is just a start.